introduction to the new edition, this one, published last year, I said that the first book arose from what I saw 20 years before as a need to make Maori preoccupations and expectations intelligible to Pākehā New Zealanders, to make it clear why I believed that Maori had every right to be Maori in their own country and to expect Pākehā to respect and support them in that mission. 2 decades on, however, at the beginning of the 21st century AD, I noted a rather different but equally pressing need to help explain Pākehā New Zealanders to Maori and to themselves, and to do so in terms of their right to live in this country, to practice their cultures and values, and to be themselves. And I was impelled to move in this direction by a variety of stimuli, including the anguished cry of children's writer Jack Lazenby, who asked in a Landfall essay, does belief in pluralism mean one must betray one's own civilization for another's? And that question was provoked by a fear that he could only value the restored place of Maori culture in our national life by devaluing or condemning the role of his own culture, which had been that of the colonizers of the tangata whenua. Pākehā culture shares some ingredients with its larger European cultures of origin, such as the English language, the Westminster parliamentary system, the traditions and the conventions of the open society, in which every person is entitled to seek truth through a process of unfettered investigation and open disputation. And what a marvellous example of the exercise of the raison d'etre for the open society was Don Cupid's clear-headed, if disputatious presentation last night. But the forms and the proportions in which these imported ingredients have coalesced in New Zealand has made them somewhat different in character from their antecedents, and hence characteristic of Pākehā culture rather than of European culture. If anyone doubts this, they have only to travel abroad to do the much-valued OE to discover that this is so. And what one discovers, of course, is that one may feel a sense of affinity in places such as England, or in my case, Ireland or Scotland, but that sense of affinity is not the same as feeling at home. In fact, no sooner is one separated for a substantial time from New Zealand voices, viewpoints, or even a sense of humour, then one misses those things and knows oneself to be from and of New Zealand and not from and of any other place on earth. Travel overseas at the age of 30 confirmed and emphasised to me that it is New Zealand and its experience and traditions, Maori and Pākehā, that is in my bones, and that there is no other part of the globe in which I would want to live or could live with the same sense of belonging and enrichment. Among the subsequent experiences that have sharpened that feeling for me are being informed by members of the Ahi group that I was, in fact, a tauiwi or foreigner in this land, and just as offensively to me, listening to Cabinet Minister Doug Graham say that Maori people had spiritual feelings for lakes, rivers and mountains, and that Pākehā people did not. Doug Graham may not have those feelings, but I and my family have them, as have the thousands of other Pākehā people I have encountered in 4 decades of walking, tramping and camping on this beautiful land, and doing their best to preserve the contours and the character of Papatūānuku from a variety of commercial interests which have sought to modify or destroy that character by ill-considered development projects. It's for all these reasons that I would now say what I did not go as far as saying 2 decades ago, that Pākehā culture can no longer be considered an imported culture. It has now been here long enough in interaction with the land and the tangata whenua to be considered a second indigenous culture. And it has become indigenous in the same way that East Polynesian culture became Maori, by turning the attention of migrants away from their land and culture of origin and focusing their sense of commitment to this land, the one in which they live. Just one indication of how far Pākehā have moved in this direction in the course of 2 generations can be gauged, of course, from the New Zealand response to the Second World War. In 1939, a New Zealand Prime Minister could say, "Where Britain goes, we go. Where she stands, we stand." And 105,000 New Zealanders, including my father and 2 uncles, served aboard in response to that call to defend Britain, Europe, and something called the British Empire. That cannot happen and won't ever happen in the future. New Zealanders would only ever take up arms again on that scale to defend New Zealand. In the new edition of Being Pākehā, I go on to say that as another indication of how far Pākehā culture has become indigenous, it's only right to see the makrokapa and the wooden church as being as emblematic of the New Zealand landscape and human occupation of it as the meeting house and the cabbage tree.
Becoming Aotearoa, A New History of New Zealand, is the first major book to examine our past since Michael King's The Penguin History of New Zealand was published in 2003. This is compulsory reading, this new book, in my humble opinion, and I'm lucky to have in the studio with me Michael Belgrave, who is the author of this book. He's Professor Emeritus of History at Massey University. He was Research Manager of the Waitangi Tribunal and has continued to work on Treaty of Waitangi research and settlements. I interviewed him about his 2017 book, Dancing with the King, which I thought was extraordinary, an exploration of diplomacy and peacemaking in the decades between the Waikato War and the opening of the King Country. He won the Ernest Scott Prize for that book, and he has worked on the new curriculum, the new history curriculum, which I hope, Michael, is actually going to happen, is it? Or is it happening already?
There's been a few political goings-on. I think that the Minister, Erica Stanford, is not showing much signs of doing a dramatic revision. I do think that it probably, given that this book was written through very changing times and it was produced at a time before the current divisions emerged, I don't think that curriculum, in the way that it has been drafted, could have emerged in the present.
No.
As a historian, I suppose what I like most about it is it's got so much stuff in it. And I'm really concerned that New Zealand's history is broken up into all these little bits. But if our kids from year 1 to year 10 get a tenth of what's in the curriculum, they'll have a much better understanding of history than people do today.
Of course.
But as a humanities historian, you kind of realise that this is social science history. It's a bit more earnest than many of us would have wanted it to be. But I think it's really important that we get a better knowledge and not be frightened of our history, which I think is one of the problems we have today.
Consulting the past, creating a national history curriculum in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Carol Neal, Michael Belgrave and Gennaro Oliveira. A new curriculum attempts to revise the historical consciousness of a society and give it an official imprimatur, all of which inevitably entrenches the present and often contested values and understanding the past. These processes also reflect broader social contests. Debates over cultural politics in the United Kingdom, Australia, the United States and Canada have contributed to the development of history wars and polarised conflicts between conservative understandings of the past, which emphasise nation-building and progress, and fundamental and broadly post-colonial interpretations which focus on slavery and colonisation and their impacts on Indigenous peoples. This debate has become so heated in the United States that state legislatures have intervened to prevent schools and teachers from teaching critical race theory, to the increasing concern of historians and teachers alike. This article assesses the public impact in Aotearoa, New Zealand, of the introduction of the new curriculum following the surprise announcement by Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in September 2019 that it would now be expected that all learners and ākonga are aware of key aspects of New Zealand history and how they have influenced and shaped the nation. In looking at the responses of teachers, academic historians and community at large and politicians, we attempt to explain why the Aotearoa New Zealand debate has so far been professional rather than polemical. Given the increasing influence of cultural politics elsewhere, developing the new curriculum had the potential for sparking some form of history wars over its content and objectives. This was particularly so given that the new curriculum was clearly to have post-colonial overtones and that it made Maori history a significant, if not predominant, focus. The draft curriculum released for consultation on 3rd of February 2021 had three elements: understand, know and do. The understand element identified three big ideas. Maori history is the foundational and continuous history of Aotearoa New Zealand, as you do. And two, colonisation and its consequences have been central to our history for the past 200 years and continue to influence all aspects of Aotearoa New Zealand. 3. The course of Aotearoa New Zealand's history has been shaped by the exercise and effects of power. The public responses. There was a generally positive public response to the curriculum's announcement and development. In the early period after the announcement, media reporting highlighted support for the curriculum and confirmed a pre-existing view that Aotearoa New Zealand must confront its colonial past and the place of Maori in society. News articles focused on the background lobbying that had led to the decision, described how different actors across schools, academia, the heritage sector and Maori communities welcomed the curriculum, and speculated on how the curriculum might be rolled out, rather than questioning the decision itself. Some might say they were somewhat biased.